Man, we've had a busy week this week with the Supreme Court. We've had a lot of things come out. Two of the toughest issues, Roe v. Wade being overturned, Second Amendment as it applies to New York State, guns, and everything else. We're going to get into that in just a minute. Welcome to Relevant Rants. I'm here with Tom Touchstone and Kyle Lawson, and we're going to just dive right in, talk about all this stuff. So,
and there's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, there is.
There's almost
We're going to
too
cover
much.
the surface.
There's almost too much because
there's no way we can cover all of it.
Because we had other rants today, and we've
Yeah.
moved them off the table just to handle Roe versus Wade.
Well, it was dropped, 2 hours ago?
Yeah.
An hour ago?
Yeah.
Something
Yeah.
like that?
Yeah, but Mike and I were at Bible study. When
We all
it happened.
anticipated it, though. We knew it was coming because the leak and everything else.
Yeah. So Roe v. Wade has been overturned. What does that mean, Kyle? What does it mean to the states? What does it mean to people? Like, there's a lot.
So what does it mean, and what is my opinion, there's a couple things here. I think that the way that our administration and society is handling this is absolutely wrong. You have an administration and your president, your speaker, all these people that are just absolutely trashing our Supreme Court, the people that are involved, and I don't think that's okay. You can disagree with someone without trying to discredit, the highest court. To me, it just blows my mind that that's where they go. Is let's just make Americans lose total trust in the thing that shapes America.
Well, too. I mean, everybody's gonna have an opinion.
Yes.
Everybody's got an opinion.
But because mine is
There's
different
an
than yours
analogy of
doesn't
that.
mean I tear you down.
Yeah.
It just means that I have a different opinion. I don't say, Tom lacks credibility and he turned the clock back. Turn the clock back. Are you?
Well, it's hard to maintain a relationship like that, and I believe in relationships. You guys know me. I mean, I think it's all about that, and you can agree to disagree, but I think that's where the power comes in.
Right.
Well, I think there's certain people that want to undermine the institutions of America, Supreme Court being one of them, but there's many others that are actively being undermined.
Well, and I think as you look at this, I think what we get out of it, it puts the state back in control.
Right.
That's what it really does. And it's interesting that they're, some of the states have already had that trigger ban.
Yes.
Just went into effect. And what is it, Kyle?
automatically.
It's within 30 days.
Yes. I think it'll automatically take effect in sub 30 days.
Yeah, so the states can just start figuring out what they want to do.
But that's kind of the way the United States was formed. It's the United States. You notice there's people leaving California. Why are they leaving? They don't agree with the politics. Okay, if you don't agree with
their choice.
Yeah, if you don't agree with the politics of your state, guess what? There's another state welcoming you that probably aligns with your politics.
Yeah. And that should be your right. It's like me. I mean, we're looking at Tennessee in 2 years.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to go there. I'm familiar with California, but my daughter and son-in-law are there.
You're excited to have some money and have it not stripped from you.
Well,
we got to get
real
back
quick,
on track.
we said trigger bans, and just so everybody understands what that means, a lot of these states, there's actually we'll read off the list to you guys in a second, but have had laws that were just kind of waiting for this to happen.
Yeah.
That basically went into effect the second this happened, banning abortion in that
Right now,
state.
The ultimate ruling was that the Constitution does not guarantee the right of an abortion.
Right.
And it's a very sensitive subject. It is so sensitive.
It's a personal subject.
And I believe
to a lot
that
of
women
people.
should have reproductive rights.
Yes.
But what are reproductive rights? Is reproductive rights, does that mean killing a child? Does it mean, what if at 1 year old? Because, okay, we've had children. I'll tell you what, a 6-week-old and a 9-month in the womb, there's not a lot of difference. I mean, they both just kind of sit there. And so does that mean, you have the right to take a life? I'm just asking a question.
Yeah.
To me, it just doesn't sit well with me whenever you have a 20-week-old baby, right? Mm-hmm. That maybe a woman has a miscarriage and people mourn for her. They hurt for her. They pray for her. They lift her up. And they say, oh, I'm so sorry. Your baby's in heaven waiting for you. These kind words.
I have done many funerals for stillborns.
Yes.
And I've counseled many mothers and fathers through losing a child through a miscarriage or something, and just see the grief on their face. So I think you're right.
Well,
and
we were
say,
talking about
lift them up in prayer and be with them and this and that. But then on the other hand, they're like, oh no, few weeks, go ahead, 7 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever have you.
Yeah.
And that's not a life yet. No, I don't know. It's a question.
Well, I looked that up, Kyle. And so in 2018, the Supreme Court ruled that the fetus's only inherent constitutionally protected right is the right to be born. You know, of course, then that starts the argument of when is conception.
Right.
You know, so there again, I've had personal friends that had a early premature birth at 22 weeks, and she's 2 years old now. Not 2 years. She's in second grade now. She's meeting all of her testing requirements, and I remember just the praying for this a child, and my daughters were praying for it because we knew this person through education, my wife's a personal friend. So I'm just saying that was a big deal, and I know how
a huge deal.
Yeah, that's 22 weeks.
Yeah, well, we have a friend in our same building as us that had a granddaughter. Actually, I know the mom as well, but at 28 weeks and is now 2 years old, hitting all of the milestones, healthy, like you would never know the difference.
Yeah, a close friend of ours, family member of mine, had a miscarriage this week. And they're devastated. And it was pretty early on, but doesn't change the fact that they've already imagined 1,000 memories with that baby. Yes. And so to think that can all just be, well, let's go to this side of the pendulum where until they're born, they don't actually have a life. I don't think it's that easy.
Well,
It's
like
not
you
that
said,
easy.
Kyle, we've all seen our wives go through the stages of birth. You know, I mean, no, excuse me, carrying the child.
Yeah.
I remember my wife told me, and we were excited, I'm pregnant.
Yeah.
You know, and
Boy, girl,
yes.
you start playing bedrooms.
So
and-
then I remember we were a week overdue, and my wife, and I've said this many times from the pulpit and other places, I had a staircase, and she was at the top of my staircase, and I used to be really large when I was bodybuilding, so I had a 5X sweatshirt that we still have, and
That's
her
big.
stomach just filled
Yeah.
it out. It was stretched like a balloon, and she said, "This baby comes out today." And I'm like, "Oh, I'll get
That's
right on
good.
that, honey." But I'm just saying, I've seen it from when you're not even showing to that stage.
Yeah.
You know, and so, I mean, as we're not seeing it outside the womb, you can tell there's a big change.
So real quick, I want to read for you guys that are watching the states that had those trigger bans go into effect. And that was Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Texas, Missouri, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Kentucky.
And they're all pretty much Republican states.
Right.
So we're going to say there is a bipartisan.
There is.
You have to be fair and say that, but I have friends on both sides of the aisles. I tell people this, and I think I've shared this with you guys. When I first registered to vote back in 1976, I was a Democrat.
Yeah.
I did.
That's why I waited till afterwards to meet you. I'm just kidding.
But I think
teasing.
one of the bigger things about this whole story, and we've talked about this before, is the leak. Like, and that's not even being
Oh
covered
my
at all,
gosh,
right?
yes. That's a big deal.
And Snowden, is that a,
Snowden?
Snowden.
Yeah.
He leaked, and he's living in Russia, if I'm not mistaken, or something.
Yeah.
Because he's still on
He's
the
in
run.
yeah.
He is, but they're not even talking about this one, let alone
And
trying
that
to
goes back
pursue
to
it.
your point. There's an agenda. There's a narrative that's trying to be.
Yeah.
And I wish there
portrayed.
wasn't. I mean,
A leak that big should be credit worthy of being reported.
That
on.
should be in prison.
It should be, yes.
Yeah.
somebody knows.
Yeah.
And why haven't we heard?
Yeah, and it's a tough deal. I think women are going to really have to do some soul searching during this. I feel for women that are faced with that decision. I think
Because it's still available.
yes,
States
I
are
think that
making
one thing that
decisions.
all states should do. We give money to everything.
Yes.
So I think that absolutely they should make, when it comes to reproductive rights, make birth control free. Make it free. Make Plan Bs free. We understand mistakes happen, and if you take immediate action, I think that's a difference.
Yes.
Make these alternatives free so people aren't forced to be in a situation where it's a tough
so
spot.
mom still has a choice. I didn't realize this until recently. My son-in-law Danny, he's been on Relative Rants before, living in Tennessee with my daughter. They're married, and he's an engineer back there. But his mom was pregnant at 17, and his father was 20. And there was an option for having an abortion or doing something else. And his mother Rita, and I just appreciate this so much because I have a son-in-law now, said no.
Yeah.
And she was 17 with the future ahead of her.
And now
she-
they're going to have some beautiful babies, and they're
Yes.
going to have a family, and
Yeah, I mean,
all
he-
of that's because she didn't.
Yeah, she didn't, and she decided to have Danny.
And that brings up a point. I have never met, and I mean maybe with the exception of one or two that just haven't fessed up. I don't know about you guys. I've never met someone that I grew close with that I knew that when they found out they were pregnant and they decided to keep it against maybe not wanting to be pregnant, they've never came back and said, you know what, I really wish I would have got rid of this kid. It's always, wow, this kid either challenged me to grow, shaped me, his added to our family is beautiful. I can't imagine life without this baby. You never hear, you know what, yeah, I wish I could just get rid of him.
And, and I've sat through those tragedies because there again, I've been in the ministry 26 years, done a lot of counseling of, the tragedies of incest and rape, and I've been there.
Oh gosh,
It's
horrible.
And that still is, I believe, and this is just where I come from all the time, I think people have a relationship with Christ or God, however you look at this, and there's, like you said, Kyle, some soul searching that has to be done.
In those rape kits, they do have contraceptives.
Yep.
Well, so what's interesting is I think some of the mothers or whatever, pregnant mothers, feel kind of backed into a corner because they're like, well, you don't want us to get an abortion, but you also don't want us to have birth control because some of the groups out there don't want birth control even, right? But so they feel backed into a corner. But I think, like, and I don't agree with that either. And I agree with what you said. But we're taking away those rights. But at the same time, right? It's like people can't control their own bodies, right? It's
there is a point where you have to say this, and I think that we can all understand that there is a modicum of self-control.
There is.
But then again, on the other side, when things happen and it's a crime, I think that you have to go an extra step in whatever that means for that person, to talk to their family, their healthcare provider, and make some decisions. But I think, this is the thing that I look at, because when my wife was pregnant and I didn't see either of my daughters, I was concerned about my wife's health. So I know that there is a provision in place to watch over the mother's health. I mean, if there's a jeopardy, and I've also heard other people mothers will usually always say, no, protect the baby.
Right.
My wife and I talked about this, and she said, at all costs, I want that baby protected.
And isn't it crazy that you could swing the pendulum? Like, so what he's saying, in almost any mother, you ask him, like, if it's the baby or me, save the baby.
Yeah.
But then the pendulum can swing so far the other way that 40 weeks or 30 weeks earlier, 20 weeks earlier, they just want to kill that same fetus that a mother is so loving that they
instinct.
would just sacrifice their own life for.
Well, I think you
How
brought
is
up
there
this
so
point before.
opposite of perspectives?
Like, you brought up this point before, and that kind of goes into what I was saying about just like where's our society going when we get to a place where people even think like, oh, I want to kill my baby.
Yeah.
Right?
I think hardened hearts.
Yeah.
Hardened hearts, one. And then two, when you say it in a more sensible, well, it's not really a baby yet. It's just a fetus. It's like there's ways that they could try and soften the argument to make it more palatable.
Yeah.
But the reality is there's a life that is going to be alive that is alive.
Well, and I'm
going
to come back to where I always stand. The Bible says that God knits them together in their mother's womb.
And he knew you before
And
you were
he
born.
knew you were before you were born. So I'll bring back the faith side into that. And when I talk about that, I mean, life is precious to God.
Joe Rogan had a podcast, a segment on one of his podcasts that was really interesting. Someone who's arguing for abortion, and of course, I'm for people's rights, and they were clarifying, and he says, well, what did you remember inside of the womb? And Rogan responds with, well, what did you remember at 1 year old? Does that mean we just get to kill you? Like at 2 years old, we could just shoot kids? Like, no.
Well, if you're out there and maybe abortion was a choice, the thing I always tell you is, and I always tell people about God forgives.
Yeah.
And if we have that heart where we're God, man, I made the best decision I could for me, then I believe that God is understanding of that, and it says he forgives all sin. And that's hard for the mortal mind to believe.
Right.
I mean, when people talk to me about that, I says, Jesus died for every sin you're going to commit and every sin you have committed.
Yeah.
And as you try to wrap your mind about it, it says, yes, he's forgiven you for that. If you come to him and confess, it says, I forgive, what you said, I cast as far as the east is from the west.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we all love about Christ, and as we go there, we do know we don't abuse grace, but we see grace as something that was, Jesus went to the cross for that.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point. There's no judgment here. Like that's not what we're. I just, and I know we're all in the same boat. We're just asking questions. How can something be so far left from right that, like, on one hand you celebrate life and mourn it when it passes at the fetus stage, but then on the other hand it's just so freely willing to abort and kill it.
Yeah.
And that's my question. It's like it can't be that black and white. That is either life or it's not, and obviously it is. Because if you don't touch it, if it's unbothered, there's going to be a baby at some point, and then that baby will be a little boy or girl, and a teenager, and then an adult, and then so life continues.
Now let's address this. And if you're out there, because this is a big deal too, because we see it in the news all the time. If you're not for abortion, can you be for the death penalty? And I can tell you that I'm not for taking any life.
Sure. Yeah.
That's a stance I'm always in.
Right.
And I've come to that opinion based on my acceptance of Christ, Him working in my heart.
Okay, we're gonna
and basically say that God is responsible for life and death, and I don't have a role in that. As far as what I see. I mean, we talk about euthanasia and all those topics.
Right.
Because there's a multitude of that. I said that's in God's hands.
Right.
And I know that's a whole other topic. But.
So the second thing we wanted to discuss was the gun decision, right?
Yeah.
As it affects New York.
Yeah, and so if you love America, there's a chance you love guns, and if you love guns, then there's a chance this might have made you excited, or I mean, you could still love America and not love guns. That's not fair to say, but
right.
But this, either you are really excited by the news, or you're irritated and you're upset and you're now bashing our Constitution and saying that it's not creditworthy and saying that it's not absolute and everything else.
Well, I think it's interesting. I was talking this morning with a friend at Bible study, and we were talking about how it seems like there's been a lot of like the right things. I think the moral things are like kind of starting to rise up a little bit.
It's that pendulum swinging back,
right?
Yeah.
But then there's also like other things that are like it's like both sides are like coming, to a head or something. But the pendulum is swinging, and I think it's a good thing in a lot of cases. And we've had some victories on the Supreme Court, which is really cool. We've got some rights back.
Yeah. So the Constitution says you have the right to possess and bear arms, right? And I think the last ruling was in 2018, I believe. They said you can have a gun at home, but you can't necessarily have it in public without cause. And that's not what the Constitution says. The Constitution says you have the right to possess, and to bear. And so where they manipulate is they're like, but not in public. Well, where does it say that in the framework of the Constitution? Where does it specify? And it doesn't. Now, the Second Amendment is not absolute. Like, you can't take a gun into a bank. You can't take it into a school. I'm a CCW holder myself. I can't take it into my daughter's school when I'm dropping her off. I can't take it into the bank. There's can't take it to rob a bank or whatever
and we understand that,
right? And so like when you really break this down, let's be real. How often? Because there's a lot of CCW holders. There's a lot. How often do you see a CCW holder in trouble with the law for abusing that privilege? You don't.
No.
You really.
Yes.
Because
you
read
usually go through courses.
Right.
And
well, not only that, because they're law-abiding.
And they make you think about what it would be to pull a trigger. And I think that's a great thing. There is a cost monetarily, and there's also a moral cost. I mean, there are things that you have to put into if you're going to do that. There again, I'm not going to jump on the side and say it's okay to kill somebody either, but in my house, I'm going to protect my family.
Well, and I think
that's a God-given right to be able to protect your family. I mean, in the Bible, it talks about that if somebody breaks, somebody has to tie the strong man up to break into his house. So I mean, saying if the strong man's not untied, he's not going to let the person break in his house.
Well, a lot of people try to say, oh, well, people like us, oh, you just want to go out, you're like gun happy, you want to shoot everyone. No. Like, no, actually, it's
no,
the
you
last
just want to
thing.
protect yourself
I was
in a world of
listening
crazies.
to Ben Shapiro yesterday in the
Daily
gym.
Wire.
And he was saying, and a great point, and I think we all agree with this, is the point of owning a gun is to never have to use it.
Well, there again, as I've been through courses, they said that if you carry your gun because you think you might have to need it, don't go to the place you were going to go.
That's a great point.
It's like, don't go there if you think you're
and I think
it.
that's a lot of the training. They were like, hey, let's try to diffuse the situation.
Well,
right?
the problem is you don't. like I get that makes sense, but it's like you don't know when you're going to be attacked,
You don't.
raped. For some women out there, or
Right, but
whoever
I
have
think
you,
the
and
point is that Tom was making, Kyle, is like you don't put yourself in
half the time it
situations where
happens
you
in a
know
subway.
that it's going to be right.
It happens in an
oh,
elevator.
absolutely.
It happens in a hallway.
But if you
But
thought
don't
it
go
was there, you
somewhere
wouldn't
where
go there.
like if you think, hey, this might happen, don't go there.
And so
right?
I just read this morning that law enforcement officers actually have more misuse of firearms than CCW holders.
I believe that.
So, general as a whole, gun owners, responsible law-abiding gun owners, are not out here just slinging their guns around causing havoc. It's the people that are illegally obtaining guns that are the ones doing it, and we just want protection from them. That's all.
We talked about before we came on air. I went to school at a time when there was gun racks in the back of pickups.
Yeah.
Windows. I mean,
Yeah.
I went to school.
and it was a safer time, Tom.
And I'm just saying, I went and you could see people drive around town, and there was rifles in these gun racks because if they saw something on the side of the road, they'd pull out their gun and shoot it.
The news or the media has
Not
been
people,
doing.
but I mean,
Yeah.
rabbit, squirrel.
Sure.
The media has been doing.
Glad you clarified that.
Great clarification. So the media's been doing. I've been making a point. I screenshot it every time I am able to find it because I'm searching these trends. The media's making a great point at covering this stuff, or not covering it, I guess would be the better choice of words. There has been so many in the last month. Crimes stopped, murders stopped because of a responsible gun owner. And that's at schools. There's been multiple attempts. An individual's trying to get into school, I think, this week, and it was stopped by a law-abiding gun owner. There are tons.
Well, that same podcast I was listening to, they were also talking about how they come up with these stats that say more mass shootings were stopped because the shooter either killed themselves or they just ran away. Well, what they're leaving out of that is the threat of the police showing up, right? So they're like, it was still stopped by someone with a gun coming to the place or potentially coming to the place.
I just have a really sincere question. Who protects the president?
People with guns.
Secret Service.
Who protects, I don't know, banks? Who protects, anyone that needs to be protected?
High profile.
And what do they use to protect them? They serve a point. They serve a point and they serve a purpose.
Yeah. And if you know you're facing that, and this is the whole point, right? If you know you're facing that, the likelihood that you're going to be aggressive towards that person is greatly diminished. But anyway, back to the point, like the ruling of New York, like what was the ruling?
The ruling. So to break it down, you've always been able to get a concealed carry, not the average person. You've always been able to get one if you had probable cause and reason. So like mine, for my business, I sell real estate. I'm always in and out of houses, vacant homes. I explained that to our local sheriff. I wrote that down, that was my reason. I'm transporting goods, etc. Everything that would make me a target. I'm alone inside of vacant properties, sometimes remote locations by myself. That was reason enough for them to allow me to carry. Now, if I would have said, hi, I'm a citizen of America, I'd like a gun, and I'd like the permission to carry it, they would have said no. Yeah. This changed that.
With I think, reasonability.
Right.
Well, right. And
so
so
what was
with
the
this,
change?
the change is that you don't have to get creative and fancy with the reason you need it. The reason is I'm a law-abiding citizen. I'm not a felon. Of course you can't be any of those things. And I have the right to carry a gun.
Yes.
That changed. Now you can be just a law-abiding citizen and obtain a gun.
Now that's specifically for the state of New York, right?
No, that's the United States. That's what they ruled. It's affecting New York because New York had it similar to California and a few other states where you had to have this extravagant reason to be able to
So
carry.
it affects California as well.
Oh, yes, it's
and
going to
we've-
affect all of them.
And we've
But
said that
it's going to have to be tested, right?
So they can try and dispute it. The states can try. I forget the verbiage, the legal jargon that they use, but they can try and refute it. And by saying that there's more bad than good by this, they're not going to find the evidence.
No.
well, yeah,
It's
you
not
know,
there.
and I think we all would agree that there needs to be background checks.
Oh, absolutely.
There needs
Yeah.
to be even thrown into it mental stability, and however they do that. And there's a lot of reasons to do that. And so I think we would say, hey, it's a good thing to have some gun control measures in place that make sure they get into the right hands before they get to that place
Sure. Yeah.
where they can carry a concealed weapon.
And ultimately, you have a Supreme Court. They are there to understand how to implement our rights as
The Constitution.
the Constitution, right? And opinion aside, bias aside, they have to remove all of that. When you look at the law of the letter, and you have to make a decision based off that, no emotion influenced at all. It's just not fair whenever you look at it and it reads these things to just say that it's, whenever you have it being presented as like, oh, I've heard Pelosi calling it, oh, it's the Trumpian court, court. How are you going to call it the Trumpian court? Because it doesn't appease you, because it doesn't go away that you think it should go. It's the Supreme Court, and it was designed, and they have rules. There's an opinion letter. Like, come on, that's not fair.
As we talk about, people going by the letter of the law. My wife was just on jury duty this week, and you have to tell people you're going to go by the law. When they swear you in, where they put it. I've been on trials before.
Speaking of, where's our attorney?
Scott, we need an attorney today.
Our fourth guest is an attorney. Yeah, he's a defense attorney. Not our specific, but he's just he could. But
anyways. There again, so I've been on juries before where I've had to say I'm going to go by the law.
Right.
Yeah.
And the judge will read you the law before he sends you back for a decision.
Yep.
So as we go into the weekend, I think there's a lot of concern about rioting and all of this stuff happening. I think that's one of the reasons they did it on Friday. And
I'm concerned for those people because we have a good friend that helps us. I won't say his name on air, but his wife is very involved.
Yeah.
And so I think, we just got to pray
in
for
politics, you're saying?
Yeah.
No.
Oh.
No.
Yeah.
She counsels a lot of women and helps a lot of women who are making a decision between having a child and not having a child.
And if you'll notice, the theme has been, you haven't heard us tear anyone down.
Nope.
You've heard us present questions in a way that just challenges you to think a little bit different. There's no burning down the house because we're upset at the spider that's inside of it. We're just provoking different thoughts and scenarios.
And I'll say this, I'm not leaving California because I'm disappointed with California.
He just wants to keep his money. That's all.
A lot of people ask me, what do you do with your title, Mr. California? I go, oh, keep it. I can live in Tennessee.
My
I don't
favorite.
revoke that.
You know what the most California thing California has ever done? In a crisis state where gas is so expensive and all these states and the federal government is talking about reducing a gas tax, California comes out and goes, knock, knock, who's there? We'd like to raise our gas tax. That is the most,
can we inflict more pain on our citizens?
That is the most California thing I've ever heard.
Well,
so
I fully believe God is moving me to Tennessee.
Yeah.
He's using me there. Mike told me this morning, I had a friend who came into our Bible study and who has moved and is starting a new life serving God. And I said, hey, I want to talk to you about what the steps where you went, because I'm going through them right now.
But as we go, I want to, Tom, if you could pray for just the country and
the mothers that are being faced with difficulty and maybe
and the potential riots.
Father God, we're just going to ask for peace. We ask for peace for our country, peace for people. I pray, God, that people would start to think about how I can bring peace to this, not confusion, not violence. I pray, God, for moms out there that might be feeling they're put in a pickle with this decision. I pray, God, you would comfort them. Let them have others come around them that would help them make decisions, help them support them. Lord, people can even get creative through these times. Pray, Lord, that as we come to you, your word says if we humble ourselves and pray, you'll heal the land. You'll heal people's lives. And we have seen that, and that's the business that I'm in. I'm in a business where I believe Christ is the answer. I believe that considering other people more important than myself is the thing that we have tried to obtain in our humanly walk. So I pray, God, let us all be good neighbors, consider other more important than ourselves, and we ask, God, that you would keep peace and comforting people at the top this weekend. And you're watching over America in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. And then also definitely lift up the justices that were not forced, but had to make this decision that they're going to take heat for.
Yeah.
And they know that their security is being, right?
Yeah.
Tested.
Yeah.
We've already seen it. Someone traveled from California to go cause harm, and that's sad.
And I want to encourage all of you guys who are watching.
Be better.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that, but also pray.
Yeah.
Pray. So this has been Relevant Rants. Have a great weekend.